بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما أما بعد Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First and foremost, I'd like to thank the host today, As-Subah Academy, for inviting me to deliver this pertinent talk on a great Imam from the first 3 centuries of Islam, Imam Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi, rahimahullah ta'ala, and go into his life and works. And so there's going to be quite a bit of detail that we're going to cover today. So please bear with me. And first and foremost, if you could please put your phones on silent, because there may be some other brothers and sisters who also turn up as we progress with this lecture today. And I do believe this will be the first of a few lectures this year to do with the biographies of famous personalities of Al-Islam. So Imam Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi, many people have heard of Imam Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi. Let's go into mentioning his full name as according to famous biographers of the madhab that he belonged to, meaning the Hanafi school. So Imam Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi, his full ancestry is given as follows by Imam Abdul Qadir al-Qurashi. So you're going to hear a lot of names today and a lot of works as well to show the history of the school that he belonged to is very rich and developed and has been around for more than 1200 years. So it's not something that's been created recently and saying it follows the early Muslims. This is a man, an Imam, who belonged to the early generations of Islam and transmitted the teachings of the early generations of Islam as well, through many of his works, which we will mention today as well. So according to Imam Abdul Qadir al-Qurashi, who's also known as Ibn Abil Wafa, who died in 775 after the Hijrah, so the 8th century, in his book Al-Jawahir al-Mudiyya fi Tabaqat al-Hanafiyya, volume 1, page 102. This is a work mentioning all the famous Hanafi scholars up till his time, up to about 700 plus AH we're talking about. He died in 775 after the Hijrah. He mentions that Imam al-Tahawi's full name, his ancestral lineage was Ahmed bin Muhammad bin Salama bin Abdul Malik bin Salama bin Sulaim bin Sulaiman ibn Habab. So this is how far his ancestry goes back. And he was born in Taha, or the nearby village of Tahtut in Upper Egypt. So he's an Egyptian scholar. And this has been mentioned, I'm giving references as well, for the benefit of the recording as well, because inshallah many people will catch up with this later when it's uploaded onto various platforms. Imam Abdul Karim al-Sam'ani died 562 after the Hijrah. He mentions in his book Kitab al-Ansab that Imam al-Tahawi, he was from the notable residents of Taha in his Kitab al-Ansab, as I've just said, but some others have said something else. Imam Ibn Yusuf al-Sadafi, who was one of his students, direct students of Imam al-Tahawi, died 347 after the Hijrah. He mentions in his Tarikh Ulama Misr, a document or a work mentioning the biographies of the famous Egyptian scholars, Tarikh Ulama Misr, that Imam al-Tahawi was not in fact from Taha. So this is a secondary view, but from the nearby village of Tahtut. Now, very few people know that. Even I didn't know this until I did some research recently. Most people know Tahawi is from Taha. But Tahtut has also been mentioned. But Imam al-Tahawi did not prefer to be called al-Tahtuti. Why? Because if you look at the name and the history behind this name, because of this nisbah, ascription, resemblance to an unpleasant word, which is called ad-durat in Arabic, which means to actually pass wind. So no one would want to be ascribed to that sort of thing. This is an unpleasant word, so he did not want to be called al-Tahtuti, but preferred al-Tahawi. So most people have heard al-Tahawi, but not this other alternative. So this has been mentioned by his student Tariq Ibn Yunus al-Misri. One of his direct students has mentioned this. Ibn Yunus, because he was a direct student, knew his teacher's rank and worth, and he praised him as well by saying, وَكَانَ ثِقَّ ثَبْتًا فَقِيهًا عَاقِلًا لَمْ يُخَالِفْ مِثْلُهُ. He was trustworthy, established, a jurist, intelligent, and he left no one like him. Meaning Imam al-Tahawi in his time, he was unique in Egypt. There was no one equivalent to him, unmatched, unparalleled. So now, let's find out when he was born. And there is some difference of opinion on when he was actually born, the year of birth. So commonly, most probably, it was 239 after the Hijrah. Most people say, most scholars say 239 after the Hijrah. Again, Ibn Yunus, in his Tariq, volume 1, page 22, mentions this. As-Sam'ani that I've mentioned, Abdul Karim As-Sam'ani died 562 after the Hijrah. Al-Ansab. Al-Saymari, one of the famous biographers of the Hanafi school, who wrote a biography on Imam Abu Hanifa, called Akhbar Abi Hanifa wa Ashabihi. He has also said 239 after the Hijrah. Now, some biographers actually mention 229, some 10 years earlier. 229 has been given by Abdul Hayy al-Laknawi, but also 229, as I've said, 230 or 238. So this Shaykh Abdul Hayy al-Laknawi from India, more than 100 years ago, we're talking about 1880s, in his book Al-Fawaid al-Bahiyya fi Tarajim al-Hanafiyya, he has mentioned these different views as well. Imam al-Suyuti, many people have heard of Jalaluddin al-Suyuti, died 911 after the Hijrah from Egypt as well. He mentions 237 in his Tabaqat al-Huffaz, a dictionary mentioning the Huffaz of Hadith, not Quran, but Huffaz of Hadith. So Imam Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi, to introduce him, he was not just an Imam, he was a Hafiz of Hadith. He memorized many Hadiths with their chains of transmission. And a later definition of a Hafiz of Hadith, someone who knows 100,000 Hadith with their chains of transmission. So also, besides being an Imam and Hafiz of Hadith, a Faqih, meaning a jurist, he was a type of Mujtahid as well. He had reached a type of Ijtihad, but there's a difference of opinion. What type of Ijtihad had he reached? What level of Ijtihad had he reached? And he's one of the few in early times to be given the title Hujjatul Islam, Proof of Islam. And that title is mentioned right at the beginning of one of his works as well, which we'll mention later inshallah. So there is some difference of opinion, but the main or the mu'tamad, dependable view is that Imam al-Tahawi was born in 239 after the Hijrah. Now as for his ancestry, they are from the Hajar branch of the Azd tribe. Azd tribe, they have their roots in Yemen and southern Arabia. So they migrated towards Egypt. And Imam al-Tahawi, his lineage goes back to the Azd tribe. So they are pure Arabs, pure Arabs. As for his father, we mentioned his lineage, Muhammad bin Salama, he was also a scholar. Not much is known about his father. What we know has been mentioned by a few biographers. Imam Ibn Khalikan, one of the later experts on the biographies of scholars, Ibn Khalikan, he died 681 after the Hijrah. He has mentioned that Imam al-Tahawi's father died in 264 after the Hijrah. This has been mentioned in Ibn Khalikan's Wafat al-Ayan. This book is available in English, has been around for many decades. Wafat al-Ayan, you can find it online on archive.org, the full work, 4 volumes. And if you're into biographies, this is a very good work to get hold of. If you don't know Arabic, then you can get the English version. The translator is Deslain, D-E, and then Slain, S-L-A-N-E. You can find it online. But the English is not brilliant. The way he's translated it, he's used some old type of English as well. So Imam al-Tahawi, he transmits hadith from his father. Again, Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Qurashi ibn Abil Wafa, he mentioned this under the entry for Imam al-Tahawi in al-Jawahir al-Mudiyya. And also, a few passages from Imam al-Tahawi's works indicate that his father was an expert on poetry. He was expert on poetry. So Imam al-Tahawi has a work called Sharh Mushkil al-Athar that I'm going to mention later on. And Imam al-Tahawi, he actually mentions some poems, some lines of poetry from his father in Sharh Mushkil al-Athar. And also, he transmits a work by Imam al-Shafi'i, As-Sunan al-Ma'thura. He transmits it from his uncle, his maternal uncle, which we will mention soon as well, Imam al-Muzani, who was a direct student of Imam al-Shafi'i. So in this book, As-Sunan al-Ma'thura, that Imam al-Tahawi is solely responsible for transmitting from al-Muzani. No one else transmits from Muzani except Tahawi. He gave some sources or 2 additional lines of a poem transmitted by al-Shafi'i to al-Muzani. And I'm talking about Imam al-Tahawi's father here. Now as for his mother, there's not much known about his mother at all. Imam al-Tahawi's mother is generally identified as a sister, as I've said, as a sister of whom? Imam Abu Ibrahim Ismail al-Muzani. So this is how Imam al-Tahawi is linked to Imam al-Muzani. The al-Muzani's sister is Imam al-Tahawi's mother. I have not found any evidence of her name, when she was born, when she died, if she was a scholar or any of that nature, that type of information. So very scarce information. And there is an anecdote about his mother as well, I'm going to mention later inshallah. So we don't know much about his mother, but there is some anecdotes which talk about the link between Imam al-Tahawi and al-Muzani. So Imam Abu Ya'la al-Khalili, Abu Ya'la al-Khalili from the 5th century, an expert on the narrators of hadith as well. In his book Kitab al-Irshad fi Ma'rifa Ulama al-Hadith, Imam Abu Ya'la al-Khalili died 446 after the Hijrah. He has a short entry on Imam al-Tahawi. Within this work, he has mentioned this link between al-Tahawi and al-Muzani, the family link we're talking about. So now, Imam al-Tahawi had many teachers, more than 100. We'll just mention a few that Imam Abdul Qadir al-Qurashi has mentioned. Ibn Abil Wafaz is known. In al-Jawahir al-Mudiyya fi Tabaqat al-Hanafiyya. He's mentioned on the volume 1, page 103, his father. Number one, his father Muhammad bin Salama, we said died 264 after the Hijrah. His uncle Abu Ibrahim Ismail al-Muzani died 264 after the Hijrah. And then in Egypt, his main teacher in Hanafi fiqh we're talking about now is Abu Ja'far Ahmed bin Abi Imran Musa bin Isa, well known as Ibn Abi Imran. Then he traveled to Syria. Ibn Abi Imran died 280 after the Hijrah. He traveled to Syria for a while and took Hanafi fiqh from another great scholar of that time, Qadi al-Quda, meaning judge of judges, Qadi al-Quda, Abu Khazim Abdul Hamid bin Ja'far, died 292 after the Hijrah. And then also other scholars, not in Syria specifically, Abu Bakr Ahmad bin Muhammad bin Mansur al-Damaghani, Bakkar bin Qutayba, who's also a well-known scholar, Sulaiman bin Shu'aib al-Kaysani, Abu Musa Yunus bin Abdul Ala al-Sadafi, and the famous Abu Abdul Rahman al-Nasa'i. I'm sure many of you have heard of Sunan al-Nasa'i. So this is one of his teachers as well. Nasa'i died 303 after the Hijrah. So if you think about it, if you look at Imam al-Tahawi's birth, 239 let's say, and died 321 after the Hijrah, most of the well-known books of hadith had been collected prior to his time, just before his time, or as he was growing up. In his teens we're talking about. So for example, Imam al-Bukhari died 256 after the Hijrah. You can work out how old was Imam al-Tahawi if he was born in 239. So he lived in a time when hadiths collected were still being collected, informally collected in terms of book format I'm talking about, not just transmitted orally, but compiled in book form. Okay, so Imam al-Tahawi had access to all of the famous collections, okay, because all of these Imam came just before his time, or were around, or lived in his time. So An-Nasai was one of his teachers as well. And as I've said, he's got more than 100 teachers. As for his students, then we can mention again Abdul Qadir al-Qurashi in al-Jawahir al-Mudiyya. He mentions Abu Muhammad Abdul Aziz bin Muhammad al-Tamimi al-Jawhari, and then Ahmed bin al-Qasim bin Abdullah al-Baghdadi, and Abu Bakr Ahmed bin Sa'dawi al-Barda'i, Abu al-Qasim Maslama bin al-Qasim bin Ibrahim al-Qurtubi, Abu al-Qasim Abdullah bin Ali al-Dawudi al-Qadi, Al-Hasan bin al-Qasim bin Abdul Rahman Abu Muhammad al-Misri al-Faqih, Ibn Abil Awwam al-Qadi al-Kabir, a great Qadi. Okay, Ibn Abil Awwam is also known as well in the Hanafi school. Abu Hasan Muhammad bin Ahmad al-Ikhmimi, Abu Bakr Muhammad bin Ibrahim bin Ali al-Mukri al-Hafiz, the one who heard Sharh Ma'ani al-Athar direct from Imam al-Tahawi. One of the works of Tahawi is called Sharh Ma'ani al-Athar, which we'll talk about later. So this is the transmitter. And then his own son. Imam al-Tahawi has a son known as Abul Hasan Ali bin Ahmad al-Tahawi, but not much is known about him as well. We have another student of his, Abul Qasim Sulaiman bin Ahmad bin Ayyub al-Tabarani, Sahib al-Mu'jam. If you studied hadith, you would have heard of Mu'jam al-Kabir, Mu'jam al-Awsat, Mu'jam al-Saghir, Kitab al-Du'a. All of these works by the famous al-Tabarani. So al-Tabarani was one of the students of al-Tahawi. And then we have Abu Sa'id Abdul Rahman bin Ahmad bin Yunus al-Misri al-Hafiz, Abu Bakr Muhammad bin Ja'far bin al-Hussain al-Baghdadi, Maymun bin Hamza al-Ubaidili, Ruya anhu al-Aqidah. This is the person who transmits the Aqidah of Imam Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi. And there are actually at least 4 students who transmit the Tahawi's creed, which we'll talk about soon, inshallah. So he had many teachers. If you want to know the background to these teachers or students, then we have a book by an Indian scholar who died in 1992, very famous, Shaykh Habibur Rahman al-Azami from India, who published some books on hadith like Musannaf Abdul Razak, Musnad al-Humaydi, Kashf al-Astar, and Zawaid Musnad al-Bazzar by al-Haytami, and so on. This book is called Al-Hawi li Rijal al-Tahawi. This book is available, you can find it online in one large volume. Within this book by Shaykh Habibur Rahman al-Azami, he mentions his teachers, students, their backgrounds, and their reliability or unreliability, as may be the case in terms of hadith transmission. And also you can find a work which is devoted to the life and background to Imam al-Tahawi by another famous scholar, Shaykh Muhammad Zahid al-Kawthari, died 1371 after the Hijrah in the 1950s. Al-Hawi fi Sira al-Imam Abu Jafar al-Tahawi. This you can find online. It's in Arabic. It's a short work. Within this he mentions the teachers of al-Tahawi, his students, his works, and so on. So I'm going to refer to al-Kawthari time to time, because he's one who's written in Arabic the Sira of al-Tahawi. In detail I'm talking about. And there were others after as well. And I'm going to refer to some of these works that you can find online or buy and so on. Now as for his madhab, I've said he's Hanafi. But he wasn't always Hanafi. So as for his madhab, he was actually a Shafi'i before he was actually a Shafi'i, born into the Shafi'i school. And he then converted, let's say, to the Hanafi school. And there's some interesting anecdotes, stories. Some may be genuine, some may be not. Okay, so anecdotes about his conversation. And some of them are interesting as well. Let's mention them. Because I've heard people, the common people out there, sometimes have asked me, is this true about Imam al-Tahawi? And I'll tell you which one specifically people have asked me about in the near future coming up. So in the Akhbar of Abu Hanifa or Ashabihi by al-Saymari that I mentioned earlier, Imam Abu Abdullah al-Hussain bin Ali al-Saymari died 436 after the Hijrah. In his book Akhbar Abu Hanifa wa Ashabihi, narrations about Imam Abu Hanifa and his companions. So if you want to know more about Abu Hanifa and his companions, with chains of transmission going back to their generation, you can get this book by al-Saymari. He mentions some of these anecdotes. He mentions, al-Saymari says that Tahawi rose to become a leader of the companions of Abu Hanifa in Egypt. And he studied the religious sciences from Abu Jafar ibn Abi Imran. So I mentioned him already, Ibn Abi Imran. He is the one who Imam al-Tahawi studied Hanafi fiqh in Egypt under. And from Abu Khazim, I mentioned him as well, the judge, and from others. He originally studied law according to the opinion of a Shafi'i. So he was a Shafi'i. And the Shaykh Abu Bakr Muhammad bin Musa al-Khawarizmi transmitted to us. So as I said, in this book by Saymar, he gives asanid, the plural of sanad, chains of transmission, for the narrations that he has collated. So he says with this chain, he said the reason he came over to the opinion of our companions, meaning Hanafis, why did al-Tahawi become a Hanafi? Is because Abu Ibrahim al-Muzani said to him one day, Wallahi la ja'a minka shay, فغضب Abu Jafar min dhalika, wa anifa li nafsihi. By Allah, may nothing come of you. So Abu Jafar was angered by that and had disdain for him, meaning for al-Muzani. So this story, there's some doubt about it. Some scholars have raised doubt about it, the authenticity I'm talking about. But nevertheless, we mention him because it's been mentioned in these types of works. And he went over to Abu Jafar ibn Abi Imran. Meaning Tahawi left his uncle al-Muzani and went to study with Ibn Abi Imran. So the first of what he wrote of his books was a short work, a mukhtasar, meaning Tahawi. He's saying the first work that he wrote was the mukhtasar. Again, that's debatable. I'll tell you why later. In which he put into order tartib, the book of al-Muzani. Meaning he arranged the book of al-Muzani called the mukhtasar of al-Muzani. So after he completed it, he said, may Allah have mercy on Abu Ibrahim, meaning al-Muzani, his uncle. If he were alive, he would perform the expiation for his oath, kafara. Because, al-Muzani swore that nothing good will come from his nephew, al-Tahawi. So there is obviously verse in the Quran about expiation. You can find it in Surah Al-Ma'idah, verse 89, if you want to know what is the penalty of swearing on oath and not fulfilling that oath. Now, the first reference to a familiar relationship between al-Muzani and al-Tahawi I've already mentioned. Imam Abu Ja'al al-Khalili has mentioned that in his Kitab al-Irshad. Now al-Khalili, he goes on to say, also he gives chains of transmissions in his Kitab al-Irshad. He says, I heard Abdullah bin Muhammad the memorizer say, meaning the Hafiz. I heard Ahmed bin Muhammad al-Shurati say, I said to al-Tahawi, why do you contradict your maternal uncle and choose the opinion of Abu Hanifa? He said, I used to see my maternal uncle continually studying the books of Abu Hanifa. Because of that, I transferred to him. So Kitab al-Irshad of al-Khalil has mentioned this. And this sounds more of like a genuine story. Okay? So he used to see his uncle referring to the Hanafi literature for certain difficult questions. The answers were there. They couldn't find the answers in the works of Ash-Shafi'i. So this sounds more genuine. And the jurist Abu Ishaq al-Shirazi, one of the Shafi'i scholars, he mentions that Tahawi as becoming a leader of the Hanafis in Egypt. He went on to say that At-Tahawi studied religious science from Ibn Abi Imran, which we know is true. and from Abu Khazim and others, as I've said. He was a Shafi'i studying from Abu Ibrahim al-Muzani. So he said to him, by Allah, may nothing come from you. So this is like the first story. So Abu Ja'far became angry at that and went over to Abu Ja'far ibn Abi Imran. After he wrote his Mukhtasar, he said, may Allah have mercy on Abu Ibrahim. If he were alive, he would perform the expiation for his oath. He wrote Ikhtilaf al-Ulama. This is true. Imam al-Tahawi did write a book called Ikhtilaf al-Ulama, but it has not reached us in our time. So I'll talk about this book later on. What form has it reached us? Ash-Shurut, Ahkam al-Quran, Ma'ani al-Athar, and he was born in 238 according to al-Shirazi, and he died in the year 321. So again, 238 is not the most acceptable view, 239 is. So this has been quoted by Ibn Qadi Shuhba in his Tabaqat al-Fuqaha, meaning Shafi'i biography literature this is. Now, Ibn Asakir, another famous biographer, he has a book called Tarikh Madinat al-Dimashq, an 80-volume work. If you find it online, you can find it online, printed, I'm talking about 80 volumes. A famous historian, Ash'ari scholar, defender of the Ash'ari school as well. Ibn Asakir, he mentioned something else in his Tarikh Madinat al-Dimashq, volume 5, page 369. He quoting al-Tahawi, he quotes Tahawi by saying, I originally wrote down hadith from al-Muzani, and I studied according to the doctrine of al-Shafi'i. After 2 years, Ahmed ibn Abi Imran came as a judge over Egypt. So I became his companion and studied according to his doctrine. I studied according to the opinions of the Kufans meaning the Hanafis. I gave up my first doctrine, meaning the Shafi school. I saw al-Muzani in a dream and he said to me, O Abu Ja'far, I break with you. O Abu Ja'far, I break with you. So again, there could be some doubt about the authenticity of this story, and I'll mention who has raised some of these doubts and mentioned reasons for doubting some of these stories soon as well. Ibn Asakir, he goes on to say, I report that the Ibn Yunus narrative, Ibn Yunus being the student of al-Tahawi that I mentioned earlier, because he, meaning al-Tahawi, gave up the Shafi school because one day al-Muzani said in the presence concerning a question, Wallahi la tuflihu abadan, so he became angry from what al-Muzani said and he went over to Abu Ja'far ibn Abi Imran. He became a proponent of the statements of Abu Hanifa until he became a leader in it. So after that he went to the grave of al-Muzani and he said, may Allah have mercy on you, O Abu Ibrahim, if you were alive you would perform expiation for your oath. So these are similar, identical stories. Now, Shaykh Fazlur Rahman Azami, I've mentioned Shaykh Habibur Rahman Azami, one of his disciples, students, is Shaykh Fazlur Rahman Azami, who is from India originally and is one of the well-known scholars of hadith in South Africa. I think he teaches in Azadville. He's alive and well, and he comes to Britain time to time. So he's written a work on Imam Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi. It's called Tanwir al-Hawi fi Tadkhira al-Imam Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi. Okay, this book, I believe it's in Urdu, and I'm going to mention more about this later. Because as I was doing the research behind this discourse that I'm presenting to you today, I was contacted by someone in New York who has translated this book into English, but it hasn't been finalized yet, it needs editing. So I'll mention something more about this person, this brother from America, and so on later on. So another anecdote, this one, someone's asked me in the past, what do you know of it, is it authentic or not? So Shaykh Fazlur Rahman Azami, he mentions this story in this book that I've just mentioned, Tanwir al-Hawi. He mentions, I came across another aspect regarding his transferal of schools in Shar Nibras. Shaykh Fazlur Rahman Azami is speaking here. A commentary of Shar al-Aqaid. Shar al-Aqaid is a commentary to Imam al-Nasafi's creed. So this book, Shar Nibras we're talking about, it mentioned in there, it mentioned Imam Tahawi was a Shafi'i first. He studied his books, meaning the Shafi'i's books, that if a pregnant woman passed away and the fetus was still alive, it would not be taken out of the stomach. Now this is not my translation, the translators use the word stomach, probably better to use abdomen. Imam Abu Hanifa states that the fetus would be taken out if the mother was to die. So Imam al-Tahawi was born that way. When he studied this mas'ala, this legal question, he said, I am not pleased to follow the school of the person who is pleased with my non-existence. Meaning if he was born as a Shafi'i and his mother had passed away and he was left to die within the womb of his mother, then he would never have been in this world. Okay, so this story, don't think it's genuine, but it's been mentioned. He then transferred to the Hanafi school and became one of its leading scholars from amongst the Hanafi mujtahideen. I have never seen the likes of Imam Tahawi and Ibn al-Humam after the three Imams. These two are fully acquainted with the science of hadith. So this is mentioned in Nibras. So it's not certain where Shaykh Abdul Rahman is talking. It's not certain where this story was taken from. I have not found it in any of the biographies of Imam al-Tahawi. Allah knows best. So it sounds apocryphal, doubtful story. So a number of these anecdotes and the authenticity that I've mentioned have actually been analysed by Shaykh Abdul Rahman Azami. But one of the most authentic is probably this narration. At least we'll finish with this point. Ibn Yunus al-Sadafi, his direct student, mentioned it in Tariq Ulama Misr, the work that I mentioned right at the beginning today, volume 1, page 21, that when Ahmed ibn Abi Imran came to us as a Qadi over Egypt, meaning a judge over Egypt, I became his disciple and adopted his doctrine, meaning his madhab, meaning the Hanafi madhab. And he had studied fiqh according to the madhab of the Kufans, meaning the jurists of the Hanafi school, who were from Kufa originally. And I abandoned my first doctrine, meaning the Shafi school. So this seems to be the most genuine story about Imam al-Tahawi's switch over from the Shafi school to the Hanafi school. Now let's move on and talk about his professional career, Imam al-Tahawi's professional career, as a scholar we're talking about. We've already mentioned his first teacher in Hanafi fiqh, Ahmed ibn Abi Imran, who's from Baghdad. And he came to Egypt in the company of a tax collector for the Abbasid Caliphate. Later, he may have served briefly as a Qadi. Who's mentioned this? Al-Khatib al-Baghdadi, the famous biographer of the scholars of Iraq, in his Tariq Baghdad, volume 5, page 349. And also in this work, he mentioned that Tahawi travelled to Syria. As I've mentioned originally, he did travel to Syria, where he studied with the Baghdadi Hanafi, Abu Khazim, Abdul Hamid bin Abdul Aziz, died 292 after the Hijrah, who was then Qadi of Damascus, the Hanafi judge in Damascus. And Ibn Asakir has mentioned this as well in Tariq Dimashq, as Saymari has in Akhbar Abi Hanifa and so on. So another Hanafi Qadi of Egypt, we mentioned before, Bakar bin Qutayba, died 270 after the Hijrah, also served as a Tahawi's teacher in Hadith and perhaps also in Fiqh. This has been mentioned by Ibn Abil Wafa. Now, as for his professional life, Imam al-Tahawi served as a Katib, meaning a secretary, a Katib, for both Bakar bin Qutayba and for his successor, the Hanafi judge, Muhammad bin Abda ibn Harb, died 277 or 278. And he was also the latter's deputy, Naib, used to be his representative, his deputy. And again, this has been mentioned by Ibn Abil Wafa, Abdul Qadir al-Qurashi in al-Jawahir al-Mudiyah. Also by Zahabi in Tadhkirat al-Huffaz, and Imam ibn Hajar al-Asqalani has mentioned this in Lisan al-Mizan as well. Now, Imam al-Tahawi, as I've said, had reached a level of ijtihad, but there's some discussion about this, difference of opinion, what level of ijtihad. Some have said he was of the third level of ijtihad, mujtahid fil masail. Some have said he was of the second level of ijtihad, mujtahid fil madhab, and some have even said he was an absolute mujtahid. So we don't need to go into that. If you read further, you'll find the discussions on this about Imam al-Tahawi. What we can say, he had reached a certain level of ijtihad, which means he was a very high-ranking scholar. And these type of scholars is very rare. You're going to find the scholars in our time reaching any of those three categories at all. If not, the first you'll probably won't find anyone who would be acceptable or agreed upon to be mujtahid, an absolute mujtahid we're talking about. Now, Imam al-Tahawi, he was a muhaddith, hafiz of hadith, I've mentioned already, and not just a faqih, not just a mujtahid, but also a scholar of hadith. And he has left some works. Let's go into an overview of al-Tahawi's works now. So I'm going to spend a bit of time on this. This is to show how proficient he was as a great scholar within the Hanafi tradition, within the Hanafi school, and his impact in the generation that he lived in and after and until it reached our time. So we're going to mention some works and commentaries to some of these works and how that impacted the scholars through the ages and even today as well. So Imam al-Tahawi, you can find most of his works have been listed again by Abdul Qadir al-Qurashi in al-Jawahir al-Mudiyya fi Tabaqat al-Hanafiyya. So it is said that Imam al-Tahawi had at least 25 works to his credit. Now I'm going to divide these works into different genres, different types, classify them. So first of all, we'll talk about theology, meaning to do with Islamic belief, Aqidah. So in terms of theology, al-Tahawi's well-known Aqidah, known as Bayan as-Sunnah wal-Jama'ah, is very famous across the whole Sunni tradition. All four madhabs have good things to say about this creed, and I've accepted this creed, and I've transmitted this creed until it's reached our time, and it's still studied today, and various people have commented on it as well. So I'll mention something about this later, soon. So this work was written at a time when there were two more Imams who were experts on creed as well, who represented the Sunni tradition we're talking about. One being Imam Hasan al-Ash'ari, who was from Iraq, he lived in Baghdad, died 324 after the Hijrah. And the other was Imam Abu Mansur al-Maturidi from Uzbekistan, as we know of it today. You know, where Samarkand, where Imam al-Bukhari was from, that region. All three of them lived at the same time, but it's doubtful that they ever met each other. So al-Tahawi, he represents the creed of Imam Abu Hanifa and his two famous disciples, Imam Abu Yusuf and Imam Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Shaybani. So this work has been transmitted with chains of transmission, and those who have studied this text under myself, for example, you would have been presented the chain of transmission, at least one chain of transmission. So we'll just mention some links back to this work. And why mention the chain? Because it shows the significance of this work, and that it reached our time and is still being transmitted with a link, direct link back to Imam Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi. So let me just mention very quickly Shaykh Hussain Usayran from his teacher Abdullah bin Muhammad al-Siddiq al-Ghumari, from Muhammad Duwaydar al-Tallawi, from Ibrahim al-Bajuri, from al-Amir al-Kabir, from al-Badr al-Hafni, from al-Budayri, from Ibrahim al-Kurdi, from Safiyuddin al-Kushashi, from al-Shams al-Ramli, from al-Imam Zakaria al-Ansari, from al-Hafiz Abu Nu'aym al-Mustamili, from al-Sharaf Abu Tahir bin Ibn al-Kuwait, from Ibrahim bin Barakat al-Ba'ali, from al-Hafiz al-Yunini, from Abu Musa al-Madini, from Abul Fath Ismail bin al-Fadl bin Ahmed al-Suraj bin al-Khshid, from al-Shaykh Abul Fath Mansur bin al-Hussain, and al-Hafiz Abu Bakr Muhammad bin Ibrahim al-Mukri. Now this Imam Abu Bakr al-Mukri is a direct student of al-Tahawi who transmits this text from Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi. Another chain going back to Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, the famous Imam of Hadith, he's also transmitted this text from his teacher Abu Hurairah Ibn al-Hafiz al-Zahabi, from his father Imam al-Zahabi, with their chain going all the way back to another student of al-Tahawi called Muhammad ibn al-Muzaffar, who narrates from al-Tahawi. And then we have another chain. It goes to some famous scholars. One of the famous scholars is a Hafiz of Hadith called Muhammad Abid al-Sindi. He's mentioned this chain in his book Hasr al-Sharid. So this chain goes all the way back to another student of al-Tahawi, Ahmed bin Muhammad bin Mansur, who transmits this text from al-Tahawi. And then these were three chains that I personally mentioned before in classes to do with Aqidah Tahawiyah. But in Imam Abdul Qadir al-Qurashi has also mentioned his sanad going back to Imam al-Tahawi. And we can link ourselves back to Imam Abdul Qadir al-Qurashi. If we go through the route of Muhammad Abid al-Sindi, you will see he links himself back to Abdul Qadir al-Qurashi. Abdul Qadir al-Qurashi is given another sanad in his Al-Jawahir al-Mudiyya all the way back, but this time goes back to another student called Maymun bin Hamza al-Hasani al-Ubaydili. So that means there's at least 4 students who transmit Imam Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi's creed, al-Bayan, as-Sunnah wal-Jama'ah. And Imam al-Tahawi starts the text by saying, one of the 4 students now will be saying, the great scholar Hujjatul Islam. So they gave him the title Hujjatul Islam, his students, and other scholars maybe agreed with that title at that time. The proof of Islam, Abu Ja'far al-Warraq al-Tahawi al-Misri, may Allah have mercy on him, said, this is a presentation of the beliefs of Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Meaning, what is Sunni Islam? What is acceptable Sunni Islam? Because today many people claim to be Sunni, but when you look at their beliefs, they're not in line with Imam Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi on some issues, for example, or they distort some of the points Imam Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi is mentioned in his famous creed. And then they promote that agenda as well by quoting someone else as a reference who's commented on this work as well. And I'll mention who he is soon. So, he says, Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah, according to the school of the jurists of this region, Abu Hanifa and Nu'man bin Thabit al-Kufi, Abu Yusuf Yaqub bin Ibrahim al-Ansari, and Abu Abdullah Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Shaybani, may Allah be pleased with them all, and what they believe regarding the fundamentals of the religion, Usuluddin, and their faith in the Lord of the worlds. And then this text has been organized in a systematic manner as well. Imam Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi talks about Allah and the uniqueness of Allah, His characteristics, His attributes, and so on. Then he talks about the Prophet ﷺ and so on. So it is thematically organized as well. Now, this text that we're talking about, Aqidah Tahawiyah, Many commentaries have been written about it. And you want to know the list, you can go back to certain works. For example, Haji Khalifa, also known as Katib Shalabi, Turkish scholar, died 1067 after the Hijrah. He has a book called Kashf al-Zunun and Asami al-Kutub wal-Funun, the removal of doubt from the names of books and the arts. So if you want to know the famous scholars of the past, up to around the year 1000 after Hijrah, let's say, some 400 years ago, the first 1000 years of Islamic history, you want to know the famous scholars and their books that have been ascribed to them, then you're going to read this book, Kashf al-Zunun. Study this book. You're writing articles, for example, or researching. Kashf al-Zunun, he has listed approximately 15,000 books. Arabic, Turkish and Farsi. Those three languages. 15,000 works have been mentioned, approximately. Kashf al-Zunun. And recently I came across the original Kashf al-Zunun in his handwriting as well. In Turkey, the Jarullah manuscript it's called, in the handwriting of Haji Khalifa, also known as Katib Shalabi, as I've said. So he's mentioned in this book, volume 2, page 1143, some works. For example, Shuja'uddin Hibbatullah bin Ahmed bin Ma'ala al-Turkistani, died 736 after the Hijrah. Najmuddin al-Turki, he wrote a book called Al-Nur al-Lami wal-Burhan al-Sati', which is a commentary on Tahawiyah. Sadruddin Ali bin Muhammad ibn al-Iz al-Dimashqi al-Hanafi, who's well known as Ibn Abil Iz. So Kashf al-Zunun, the author of Kashf al-Zunun, has mentioned this work being by Ibn Abil Iz, a commentary to Tahawiyah, because some people later, scholars I'm talking about, have had doubts. Did Ibn Abil Iz actually write a commentary to Tahawiyah or not? According to Haji Khalifa, Ibn Abil Iz did write a commentary to Tahawi's creed. So we're going to talk a bit about Ibn Abil Iz soon, inshallah. And we have Mahmud bin Ahmed bin Mas'ud al-Kunawi, who has a work called Al-Qala'id fi Shar al-Aqaid, which has recently been printed in the last 2 or 3 years. And according to Shaykh Zahid al-Kawthari, this is probably the best commentary on Tahawi's creed. Al-Qala'id fi Shar al-Aqaid by al-Kunawi. Al-Qadi Sirajuddin Umar bin Ishaq al-Hindi al-Hanafi. And then we have Abu Abdullah Mahmud bin Muhammad bin Abi Ishaq al-Faqih al-Hanafi. And many others. He's mentioned a few more, and there's obviously some more that are written after his time as well. Now, what is the significance of this work? As I've said, it's been accepted by all the 4 madhabs. Let's just quote one authority from the Shafi school, Imam Tajuddin al-Subki. In his Mu'id al-Niyam wa Mubidul al-Niqam, he mentions on page 62, the Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah from the Hanafiyyah. Who are the Ahlul Sunnah? You want to define. Then they are from the Hanafi school. Then he says from the Shafi school, from the Maliki school, and the virtuous ones from the Hanbali school. And note he's used virtuous Hanbalis, because there's been a group of Hanbalis who are not virtuous, meaning in terms of their creed. We're not talking about jurisprudence here, fiqh. In terms of their creed, some Hanbalis did not really follow the views of the likes of Imam Ahmed ibn Hanbal and the early generations of the Hanbali school. And they are upon the path of the Shaykh al-Sunnah, Abul Hasan al-Ashari, meaning Ahlul Sunnah accept the Asharis as being an acceptable explanation of what is the way of Sunni Islam. Later he mentioned the Aqidah of al-Tahawi, meaning al-Subki, was accepted and adopted happily by the Imams of the various madhabs by saying in summation, the creed, meaning the Aqidah of al-Ashari, is what's contained in the creed of Imam Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi. So Ashari's creed, you find in Tahawi's creed. Al-Maturidi's creed, you'll find in al-Tahawi's creed. Al-Maturidi was a Hanafi as well, which the scholars of the various legal schools have endorsed and are content with as a creed. So say to those fanatics among the sects, meaning those who have created divisions in the Ummah and created different sects, take heed, leave your fanaticism, abandon your heresies and defend the religion of Islam. Now we've mentioned Ibn Abil Iz, because this work has been promoted, has been published in the last Islamic century by people who claim to follow the Salafus Salihin, and they call themselves Salafis. So leave that aside. What do the true scholars of Islam who are Hanafi have to say about Ibn Abil Iz? Because even this question comes up time to time in our time as well. People are still talking about online, on social media and so on. Warnings against Ibn Abil Iz. Let's mention, because he belonged to the Hanafi school, but he wasn't pure Hanafi as well, we can mention as well, in terms of his fiqh. So Imam al-Hafiz Murtada al-Zabidi, a true Hanafi master, who was a Hafiz of Hadith, who wrote a commentary to Ihya Ulumuddin of al-Ghazali in 10 bulky volumes, and a master of Arabic language as well. Taj al-Urus is his dictionary, which is in 20 volumes. So he's mentioned in his book Ittihaf Sa'adat al-Muttaqeen, which is the commentary to Imam al-Ghazali Ihya Ulumuddin. He's mentioned on the volume 2, page 146, that after examining these words, meaning of Ibn Abil Iz, carefully, and when did Murtada Zabidi live? 12th century, died 1205 after the Hijrah in Egypt, and he's originally from India. Okay, he's mentioned, after examining these words of Ibn Abil Iz carefully, I found them to be in contravention of the principle of the school of his Imam, meaning the Hanafi school, the founder of the Hanafi school, meaning Abu Hanifa. In fact, he seems to be rejecting the Imams of the Sunnah as if he were the advocate of their opponents, speaking rashly and trespassing bounds, until he compared the position of Ahlul Sunnah with the sayings of Christians. Let the reader therefore beware. So this is a person who's warned against this person who claims to be Hanafi, meaning Ibn Abil Iz, and is promoted by those who call themselves Salafis. And we're talking about his commentary to the Tahawi creed, Al-Aqidah Tahawiyah. Mullah Ali al-Qari, another expert of the Hanafi school, he's mentioned in his commentary to Fiqh al-Akbar, Sharh al-Fiqh al-Akbar, one must not pay any attention to what the innovators imagine on rational basis. And the commentator of Tahawi's Aqidah, meaning Ibn Abil Iz, committed a mistake in this regard when he said, can any vision be rationally conceived without face-to-face encounter, and in it there is a proof for his elevation, until the end. So he's criticizing him. One of the biographers of the Hanafi school that I've not mentioned, Imam Qasim bin Qutlubugha al-Hanafi, he has a book called Taj al-Tarajim. He has not listed Ibn Abil Iz as a Hanafi. Didn't give him that recognition. And Ibn Abil Iz also wrote a critique on the famous Hanafi fiqh man called Al-Hidayah. Al-Hidayah, which is studied in the madrasas all over the world. This is essential reading within the madrasa system. You will find Imam Qasim bin Qutlubugha has also wrote a critique on the work that Ibn Abil Iz wrote on the Hidayah, a critique on the Hidayah that he wrote. So this has been mentioned by Hafiz al-Sakhawi in his work Al-Daw al-Lami under the biography of Shaykh Qasim. He's mentioned that Shaykh Qasim, who was his teacher Qasim bin Qutlubugha, that Shaykh Qasim did write a rad on Ibn Abil Iz's critique on the Hidayah al-Marghinani. And this book has been published in our time. The Ibn Abil Iz's critique on Hidayah by who? People who have got an agenda against the Hanafi school, meaning Salafis. The people who have got opposition to the Hanafi school today generally are people who are la madhabi. They don't follow any school. So Salafis in Arab lands, they published the critique on Hidayah and also al-Tahawi's so-called commentary on Al-Aqidah al-Tahawiyah. So this person does not represent the teachings of Abu Hanifa in some points, nor does he represent the fiqh of Abu Hanifa on some points. So there have been other scholars who have critiqued Ibn Abil Iz. For example, you can find Imam Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani. He gives a long statement in his Inba al-Ghamar, volume 1, page 258, under the year 784 after the Hijrah, what the scholars said about Ibn Abil Iz, and what Ibn Abil Iz had said that scholars faulted him on, and the trial of Ibn Abil Iz, and the jailing of Ibn Abil Iz, and so on. And Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, his teacher is Shaykh Zainuddin al-Iraqi. Hafiz al-Waqt, he's titled, the Hafiz of the Age in Hadith. He has written a work called Mihna Ibn Abil Iz. That's just been published recently. But beware, it's been, again, these people have an agenda. It's been edited by a Salafi, because they want to promote an agenda. They put footnotes down. And this is what they do. They take classical works. They don't follow those scholars, really, in a lot of the issues. But they put these footnotes to digress and put people off from following those scholars in a true way. Take their positions instead, what they're promoting in the footnotes. You see this. Okay, so they have an agenda to publish books. These books, they don't even belong to the madhab of the scholar that they're editing. But they put out these works with their footnotes to digress people away with a certain agenda. So you can find more on darultahqiq.com. There's an article, Scholarly Verdicts on Ibn Abil Iz and his Sharh on Al-Aqidah Tahawiyah. You can find the same article on Ahlus Sunnah forum, ahlussunnah.boards.net. And some English translations have come out on Tahawi's creed. Actually, the first person to translate Tahawiyah was actually a non-Muslim. And I've forgotten the name of the translator. It's quite a few decades ago as well. I found an old journal some time back, and it was Tahawi's creed, translated. And it's archaic English, not very modern style of English as well. In America, I'm talking about. So, presently, a friend of mine is working on a commentary on Tahawi's creed by Imam Sirajuddin al-Ghaznawi al-Hindi, died 773 after the Hijrah. This is nearly finished. It's about 150 pages, due to be published this year, inshallah. So if you want to study the creed of al-Tahawi, with a commentary in English, then this will be one of the ones that you would want to get hold of. And then we have also one of our contemporaries here in London, Mufti Abdul Rahman Manghera Sahab, that many of you have heard of. He's been working on a commentary on Tahawi's Creed for some time now, and we're not sure exactly when it will come out. And this, I believe, will be quite large, because I think he's used a few different commentaries as well. And there are a number of basic translations. For example, there's a commentary to Tahawi's Creed that was published in India, probably in Urdu. It's been translated into English by the late rector or principal of Darul Ulum Deoband, Qari Tayyib. This you can find in English. You can find it online as well. In English, Iqbal Azami from Leicester, he's translated it some time back, probably in the 90s. Hamza Yusuf from America has translated it with some commentary. Fahim Hussain from South Africa. And there's some others as well. The Orientalists have translated. One of the Orientalists that I can mention, not the one I'm referring to, the first translator, is one who was a professor of Arabic and Oriental Studies in Scotland, called Montgomery Watt. He's also translated it back in the 90s as well. So this just shows how popular this work was, Imam al-Tahawi's work, and people are still focusing on this. And as I said, people who are not Hanafi and they've got an agenda against the Hanafi school, they are also writing commentaries to this work today. And some of these have been translated into various languages as well. I'm talking about the Salafi sect. They have translated it from the Arabic commentaries into English with an agenda. The agenda being that they will subtly go against certain points that Imam al-Tahawi's mentioned, or other scholars from within the Sunni tradition have mentioned. So they have an agenda. As I've said, they will publish these commentaries and they'll put their footnotes in with a certain agenda. And then, many of you know, I've been doing a commentary on Tahawi's Creed for a number of years, over 10 years, and you can find a recording of this as well. If you've not been to a live presentation, on sunnicourses.com you can find a recording as well. Now let's move on to another work Imam Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi has written on theology. So we've just covered theology so far. His first work on theology I've mentioned, Al-Aqidah Tahawiyya Bayan al-Sunnah wal-Jama'ah. We have another work ascribed to him, Kitab al-Nihl wa Ahkamiha wa Sifatiha wa Anjasiha. What does that mean? Religious sects, their laws, characteristics and types, which is said to be in what? 40 parts. Unfortunately, this book has not reached our time. This has been mentioned by Shaykh al-Kawthari in his Al-Hawi fi Sirat al-Imam al-Tahawi, page 39, without citing his source though. Who's mentioned this before his time? Which biographer? Well, we trust Kawthari because he was an expert on Arabic manuscripts as well. He knew the manuscripts in Turkey, in Egypt, in Syria, and their locations as well, because he was into manuscripts. So most likely he came across a previous scholar who'd mentioned this work as well. Now let's move on to biographies and history. We have Imam al-Tahawi's work, Al-Tarikh al-Kabir, which has not reached our time, the comprehensive chronicle. Imam Abdul Qadir al-Qurashi that I keep mentioning, in Al-Jawahir al-Mudiyya, he's referred to this book, Al-Tarikh al-Kabir. Also, we have other works by Imam al-Tahawi that have not reached our time. Manaqib Abi Hanifa, Virtues of Abu Hanifa, and his book Rad ala Abi Ubaid fi ma'akhta fiha, a refutation of Abu Ubaid's errors. Who is Abu Ubaid? He was actually a Sunni scholar. Abu Ubaid al-Qasim bin Salam died around 224 after Hijrah. But he made some errors, so Imam al-Tahawi wrote this Rad or refutation or expose on his errors. Exegesis now, tafsir. Imam al-Tahawi was also a mufassir, a commentator of the Quran. So as I said, he was not just an imam, he was a faqih, he was a type of mujtahid, he was a hafiz of hadith, he was hujjatul Islam, but also he was a mufassir, an all-rounder, an absolute all-rounder, a mufassir of the Quran. So we have now, in our time, scholars have come across a work called Tafsir al-Quran. This is a manuscript still in Jami al-Shaykh in Alexandria in Egypt. Alexandria, port city in Egypt, bearing Imam al-Tahawi's name and beginning with Surah Al-Anfal. So it's not a complete work. This has been mentioned in the Institute of Arabic Manuscripts, Fihris al-Makhtuta al-Musawwara, edited by Fuad Sayyid, volume 1, page 29 to 30. And then we have, in print, partially discovered and printed work called Ahkam al-Quran. This has been published in 2 volumes, the legal rulings of the Quran in 2 volumes, and this covers fiqh issues with hadith-based evidences. It seems to have been a 4-volume work originally, because the catalogue, the editor of this book, Ahkam al-Quran, Sa'aduddin Hunal, he mentions that the catalogues mention that there was actually 4 volumes found in a location called Amasya in the northeast Turkey. The catalogues mention 4 volumes, but only 2 have been found, which means either the other 2 volumes have been lost or stolen. And this does occur time to time. People do actually steal manuscripts from famous libraries, because manuscripts, you can get them out and you put them through auction houses, like even here in the UK, like Sotheby's and Christie's here in London. You get thousands of pounds for well-known manuscripts. So this, unfortunately, the other 2 volumes has been lost. So it's been published back in the 90s, Ahkam al-Quran, in 2 volumes. As for his hadith works, a number of them have been published. Sharh Ma'ani al-Athar, an elucidation of the meaning of reports. And then Sharh Mushkil al-Athar, also known as Bayan Mushkil al-Athar, an elucidation of problematic reports. And we've mentioned Ahkam al-Quran again, because it has many hadiths within it as well. All 3 works contain substantial prophetic hadith and varying degrees of discussion on the reliability of particular hadith and their transmitters, meaning the ruwat, the narrators, the sub-narrators. So the first 2 works I've just mentioned, Ma'ani al-Athar and Mushkil al-Athar, completely available, published, edited, and commentaries have been written, especially on Ma'ani al-Athar that I'll mention soon. And these 2 works, Ma'ani al-Athar and Mushkil al-Athar, are part of the Dars al-Nizami in some of the Indian subcontinent madrasas, and maybe over here in the UK as well. And it's essential reading for the madrasa students as well, because it really shows you the basis of the Hanafi school and the evidences for the Hanafi school for many legal positions. So the Hanafis, people today, they write critiques against the Hanafi school or verbally abuse the Hanafis online or on the street, and they don't really know the history of the school. If these people were to read the works of al-Tahawi that I've just mentioned, you will see we have evidences for virtually every position that we hold from early times. Either a verse from the Quran, or a hadith report, or sayings of the Sahaba, and so on. So Imam Abdul Qadir al-Qurashi has mentioned in al-Jawahir al-Mudiyya that Sharh Ma'ani al-Athar was the first work that Imam al-Tahawi compiled. The first work, Sharh Ma'ani al-Athar, and the Bayan Mushkil al-Athar was the last work Imam al-Tahawi compiled. Now you think about it. If anyone has read or looked at Sharh Ma'ani al-Athar, if this was his first work, then he was an amazing Imam. For one, to write that book, and that's his first work out of, say, 35 works, I'm going to mention 35 works. If that was his first work, that means he was a genius. But this is not an easy work to follow. Sharh Ma'ani al-Athar, it's a multi-volume work we're talking about. And if that's his first work, that means the man was a genius to write that as the first work. The best edition of Sharh Mushkil al-Athar is edited in 16 volumes by the late Shaykh Shu'aib al-Arnaud. Died 2016. And there is a beautiful 7-volume manuscript of Sharh Mushkil al-Athar in the Fayzullah Effendi manuscript collection in Istanbul, which I've got a copy of, alhamdulillah, a digital copy of. Sharh Ma'ani al-Athar attracted a number of commentaries and abridgments, meaning summaries of it as well. So the first known commentary on it seems to be by Imam Abu Muhammad al-Manbiji, died 686 after the Hijri. We're talking about Sharh Ma'ani al-Athar. And a part of the manuscript is in the Ayah Sophia manuscript library in Istanbul, Turkey. The Mamluk Sultan al-Mu'ayyad, the Mamluk dynasty in Egypt we're talking about. We're talking about the 9th century now, 9th century after Hijrah. The Mamluk Sultan al-Mu'ayyad created a professorial chair, meaning he appointed someone to be a professor and teach this work. And who is this person? The first person to be given that position to teach it to scholars and lay people was Imam Badruddin al-Aini al-Hanafi, a very famous scholar of the Hanafi school and defender of the Hanafi school as well. Wrote a commentary to Sahih al-Bukhari. It's called Umdatul Qari. Very large work, about 25 volumes. Umdatul Qari. So he wrote some commentaries to Sharh Ma'ani al-Athar, which I'm going to mention, but he was given a chair to lecture on Sharh Ma'ani al-Athar in the Mu'ayyadiyya Masjid in Cairo. Shaykh al-Kawthari mentions this in al-Hawi, page 34 to 35. And Imam al-Aini, Badruddin al-Aini, died 855 after Hijrah, 855 after the Hijrah. He wrote 3 works on this book, Sharh Ma'ani al-Athar. One being Maghani al-Akhyar fi shar asami rijal ma'ani al-athar, meaning about the narrators, the sub-narrators in the chains of transmission in shar ma'ani al-athar. So this has been published, Dar al-Kutub al-Ilmiyah, 2006, in Beirut. Second being Nukhab al-Afkar fi Tankib Mabani al-Akhbar fi shar ma'ani al-athar, published 2008, Dar al-Nawadir. Also Mabani al-Akhbar fi shar ma'ani al-athar, which is in 6 volumes in his handwriting. You can find this still in the handwriting of Al-Aini, Badruddin Al-Aini, in Dar al-Kutub al-Misriya in Cairo, in his handwriting. You may say, what's so amazing about that? Actually, it is amazing because many of the earlier works, is rare to find those works in the handwritings of those authors. Because there are copies of copies made, and the earliest extant copies usually disappear. So you will not find, for example, the earliest copy of Bukhari in the handwriting of Bukhari, or Muslim, or Abu Dawud, Tirmizi, Nasai, Ibn Majah, or the 4 Imams, like Abu Hanifa, Malik, Shafi, Ahmed, whatever works have been ascribed to them, you're not going to find their works in their handwriting, because they've been lost. Copies of copies have been made, and then transmitted until they've reached our time. Then, later on, from the Indian subcontinent, Shaykh Yusuf al-Kandalawi died 1965, linked to the Tablighi Jamaat. Shaykh Yusuf al-Kandalawi, he wrote a book called Amani al-Akhbar fi Shar Ma'ani al-Athar in 4 incomplete volumes. Why he couldn't complete it is because he was young when he died. He was only approximately 49 years of age, so he couldn't complete it. Majani al-Athar min Shar Ma'ani al-Athar by Shaykh Ashik Ilahi Bulanshari al-Madani, also from the Indian subcontinent. His commentary, I've not seen it, but some of the writers of Imam al-Tahawi's background have mentioned this work. This Shaykh Ashik Ilahi passed away a few years ago. Shar Ma'ani al-Athar has also been abridged, as I said, Mukhtasar editions by Imam Ibn Abdul Bar al-Maliki, a Maliki Imam, died 463, and a Hanafi Imam Zaylai, Jamaluddin al-Zaylai, the author of Nasab al-Raya, fi Takhrij Ahadith al-Hidayah, died 762 after the Hijrah in Egypt. So, other scholars have written abridgments or commentaries to Shar Ma'ani al-Athar, including Ibn Rushd al-Jadd, a Maliki scholar, died 520. Imam Abdul Qadir al-Qurashi in his al-Hawi fi Takhrij Ahadith Ma'ani al-Athar has gone into this work as well, analysed the authenticity of the reports. And this has been published in 3 volumes by Dar al-Kutub al-Ilmiyah in 1999. Now, you may be interested also into looking into this work, if you don't know Arabic, in the English language, doing some research and background checks. You find a large portion of Shar Ma'ani al-Athar has been translated into English. And you can find it online now under the title Mu'in al-Tahawi by Shaykh Iqbal Ali Patel. There's 706 pages on a website. It's a WordPress.com website. Mu'in al-Tahawi, M-U-E-I-N-U-L-T-A-H-A-W-I, Mu'in al-Tahawi. You can go through Google and probably find it. There's about 706 pages uploaded. I'm not sure if it's completed the commentary, but over 700 pages available to read, just to appreciate this work. And also, a complete English translation of Shar Ma'ani al-Athar is due to be published here in the UK, in London, by Turath Press here in London. So this has been going on for several years. I've been hearing about it, and I'm not sure what stage they've got to now. As for Shar Mushkil al-Athar, not much commentary or attraction towards it. As I said, the best edition of this book is the edition of Shaykh Shu'aib al-Arnaud. But again, it was abridged by the Maliki scholar Abul Walid al-Baji, died 474. And also further abridged by a Hanafi scholar called Yusuf bin Musa al-Malati in his book Al-Mu'tasar min al-Mukhtasar. And he was one of the teachers of Imam Badruddin al-Aini. Then, other works by Imam al-Tahawi connected to the science of Hadith. We have a short work by him on Hadith terminology. It's called Al-Taswiya Bayna Haddathana wa Akhbarana. The equivalence of he transmitted to us and he informed us. So it's a short work. And that's been published and edited by the late Shaykh Abdul Fattah Abu Ghudda. In Shar Mushkil al-Athar, Imam al-Tahawi refers to another one of his works called Naqad al-Mudallisin lil-Karabisi. This critique of the book entitled Those Who Conceal Defects in the Transmission of Prophetic Reports by al-Karabisi. So this book has been lost, but Tahawi refers to it, and some later scholars have recourse to it, looked into it and referred to it. For example, Imam Alauddin al-Mardini al-Turkmani died 745 after the Hijrah. He quotes some points from this Naqd al-Mudallisin al-Karabisi in his al-Jawhar al-Naqi fil Rad al-Sunnan al-Bayhaqi. And remember this Imam because we're going to mention him again soon, later on. And we already mentioned that Imam al-Tahawi is responsible for transmitting Imam al-Shafi'i's Sunan al-Ma'thura on the authority of his uncle al-Muzani. So this is available, it's been published. And according to the German Orientalist, Karl Brockelmann, died in 1956. He wrote a work in the German language which has been translated into Arabic, in Arabic it's called Tariq al-Adab al-Arabi. Volume 3, page 265, he mentions Imam al-Tahawi and the works that he's come across in manuscript format. So in volume 3, page 265 of the Arabic edition, Tariq al-Adab al-Arabi, he mentions that Imam al-Tahawi, apparently he has compiled a book called Sahih al-Athar, which would have been an interesting work if it was genuinely by Imam al-Tahawi, because it would be about authentic reports, Sahih al-Athar, authentic reports to do with, fiqh issues or hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, the evidences, Sahih reports. But it's not by Imam al-Tahawi. Now, where is this manuscript? Karl Brockelmann mentions that it's found in the Khuda Baksh Library in Patna, India. Okay, this library, still around today, has thousands of Arabic manuscripts. It does mention this title in the catalogue, Sahih al-Athar, but this is not by al-Tahawi. Why? Because, yes, let's mention Al-Kawthari has mentioned this as well from Brockelmann in his Al-Hawi fi Sira al-Imam Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi, as have others as well. But why is it not by him? Because I went and looked further into this. In the catalogue, the Khuda Baksh catalogue, it does mention Tashih Ma'ani al-Athar, another work, and he ascribes it to a Maliki scholar called Abul Hasan Muhammad bin Muhammad al-Bahili, died around 321 after the Hijrah. Now if we examine it, and we find another manuscript, we find actually this Sahih al-Athar is actually by another scholar called Abul Walid ibn Rushd. So if we get another manuscript which is identical to the one that's found in the Khuda Baksh library, we can work out who is the real author. And when we look into it, it is actually by Abul Walid ibn Rushd, not by al-Bahili and not by al-Tahawi. So this has been incorrectly catalogued in the Khuda Baksh library, and Karl Brockelmann has only mentioned that information because it's been mentioned in the Khuda Baksh library catalogue. So Sahih al-Athar, to conclude, is not by Imam Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi, not by the Maliki scholar al-Bahili, but by Abul Walid ibn Rushd. So some people, they still mention, Sahih al-Athar is by Imam Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi. It's not proven to be so. Now, if you haven't got the time or the energy or the scholarly credentials to read all of Imam Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi's works where he mentions the hadiths in various works that we've mentioned up to date, then we have a wonderful work compiled by an Indian scholar called Shaykh Latif al-Rahman al-Qasimi. He has compiled a work called Musnad al-Tahawi. Musnad al-Tahawi, he published it in 10 volumes. Yes, 10 volumes. What he's done, he's taken all of the narrations that he could find in 8 of Imam Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi's works and left out the repetitions. So these works are Shar Ma'ani al-Athar, Shar Mushkil al-Athar, Ahkam al-Quran, As-Sunan al-Mathura, Al-Taswiya Bayna Haddasana wa Akhbarana, Kitab al-Shurut al-Saghir, Kitab al-Shurut al-Kabir, and Al-Rad al-Karabisi, which, as I've said, is lost, but some scholars have mentioned some points from it, previous generations of scholars. And how many narrations has he mentioned with that repetition? 10,380. So that just shows Imam al-Tahawi, he transmits at least 10,000 narrations with chains of transmission. Now as for Imam Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi's law works, fiqh works we're talking about now, we mentioned Shar Ma'ani al-Athar, Shar Mushkil al-Athar, and Ahkam al-Quran. Then as for fiqh, Hanafi fiqh we're talking about, he has a work called Al-Mukhtasar al-Fiqh. And many people think it's just one work, but actually there are 2 works with that title. One is the larger work and one is a smaller work. One is Al-Mukhtasar al-Kabir and the other one is Al-Mukhtasar al-Saghir. Again, Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Qurashi in Al-Jawahir al-Mudiyya has mentioned these 2 Mukhtasar of al-Tahawi. And this work, as I say, it's a manual on Hanafi fiqh, has also attracted a lot of attention and commentaries to it. Again, I've mentioned Haji Khalifa today. Khashf al-Zunun, that work, as I said, that mentions approximately 15,000 works, compiled up to the year 1000 at least, let's say. Because he died 1067 after the Hijrah. So 1,000, the first millennium of Islamic history, at least 15,000 titles he's mentioned in this book. Kashf al-Zunun. So you imagine now, you think Islam and its scholarship has been vast. 15,000, that's a lot of literature that's been compiled in 1,000 years. What about after the year 1,000, after Hijrah to our time? Thousands of works have been written as well. So in Kashf al-Zunun, he mentions some commentaries to the Mukhtasar of al-Tahawi. I won't give you all the titles, just some of the names. For example, Bahauddin al-Isbijabi, died 535, wrote a commentary on this. Abu Nasr Ahmed bin Muhammad bin Masud al-Wabari. Abu Bakr Ahmed bin Ali, famously known as Al-Jassas. Abu Bakr al-Jassas was one of the early scholars who wrote a commentary to the Quran as well. And so he also wrote a commentary to the Mukhtasar of al-Tahawi, which has been published in our time in 7 or 8 volumes. You can find that in certain bookshops. We have Abu Abdullah al-Hussain bin Ali al-Saymari, that I mentioned before, Akhbar Abi Hanifa wa Ashabihi. Abu Bakr Ahmed bin Ali al-Razi, and Muhammad bin Ahmed al-Isbijabi. Shams al-Aimma Muhammad bin Ahmed al-Sarakhsi, also a very famous scholar within the Hanafi tradition. He has also written a commentary on this work in 5 volumes. So this shows that al-Tahawi's work, it was famous, acceptable, and that's why it drew commentaries to it as well. And as I said, one commentary has reached our time, the commentary by Al-Jassas. And this is important to know Jassas' name as well, because there's another work that I'm going to mention by al-Tahawi next. I mentioned earlier Imam al-Tahawi, now we're talking about other works of al-Tahawi, compiled a book called Ikhtilaf al-Ulama, the differences amongst the scholars, meaning across the board, from different madhabs, up till Imam al-Tahawi's time. So Ikhtilaf al-Ulama, disagreement of the jurists, is only available as an abridged format by Al-Jassas, Abu Bakr al-Jassas. This has been published as Mukhtasar Ikhtilaf al-Ulama in 5 volumes. And you'll see he gives the views of Abu Hanifa, Malik, Shafi, Ahmed ibn Hanbal, Sufyan al-Thawri, al-Awza'i, and so on. Many of the founders of various madhabs in the first 300 years, we'll say. Al-Tahawi, he also has left some other works. One called Jami al-Kabir fil Shurut, comprehensive contract formulary to do with contract law. The fully available Al-Shurut al-Saghir, concise contract formulary. His Shurut al-Awsat, the medium contract formulary, have been mentioned by Abdul Qadir al-Qurashi in al-Jawahir al-Mudiyya. As for other works, his Shar al-Jami al-Kabir, or the major compendium, and Shar al-Jami al-Saghir, commentary on the minor compendium, these works refer to 2 works by Imam Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Shaybani. Al-Shaybani wrote al-Jami al-Kabir and Jami al-Saghir. Imam al-Tahawi has written commentaries on both of these works. Imam Abdul Qadir al-Qurashi also mentions that Imam al-Tahawi wrote Kitab Asluhu Kitab al-Azal. This is a work on birth control, as well as Al-Nawadir al-Fiqhiyya, legal rarities, Hukum Aradi Makkah, the legal status of the land surrounding Makkah, Qasam al-Fay wal-Ghanaim, the division of spoils and booty, Ikhtilaf al-Riwayat ala Madhab al-Kufiyin, divergent legal opinions of the Kufan school, Al-Rad ala Isa ibn Aban, refutation of Isa ibn Aban, Al-Nawadir wal-Hikayat, rarities and recountings, Al-Mahadir wal-Sijjilat, minutes of the court and records of the Qadi's judgments, Al-Wasaya, bequests, and Al-Faraid, inheritance shares. And Al-Kawthari in his Al-Hawi fi Sirat al-Tahawi, he's mentioned 2 more works, Riziyah on calamities and Kitab al-Ashriba on beverages. Now, Ismail Pasha, who died in 1399 after the Hijrah, which is about 1978-79, he continued to add on where Haji Khalifa left off. I mentioned today Haji Khalifa's book, Kashf al-Zunun, which has listed about 15,000 works. This person, Ismail Pasha, he continued to mention famous works by famous scholars for the last 400 years after Haji Khalifa. It's called Hadiyatul Arifin. So in this book he has added 2 more works ascribed to At-Tahawi. One's called Al-Khitabat, discourses, and another one called Al-Mishkat, the lamp. But he has not given any reference to where these works exist by At-Tahawi, or which scholar of the past has mentioned these 2 books to be by At-Tahawi. So if we count all of these works, we come to 33. I've mentioned 33 titles up till this point. 33. So let's say at least, 30 of these works seem to be confirmed to be by Imam al-Tahawi, and some others we're not sure exactly who's mentioned them to be. Now, every great scholar in Islamic history will have his opponents, criticism leveled against him or his critics and so on. So Imam al-Tahawi was not free of that as well. So two well-known scholars have raised some objections against Imam al-Tahawi, and we'll mention this and how he's been defended as well, and who defended him as well. So the first person noted to have critiqued Imam al-Tahawi is the famous hadith scholar, Shafi'i scholar, Imam al-Bayhaqi. I'm sure many of you have heard of al-Bayhaqi. This has been mentioned in his book Ma'rifat al-Sunan wal-Athar, which has been published in recent decades. And this has been discussed as well in Pakistan in 1969, so 50 years ago. Muhammad Saghir Hasan Ma'asumi, he's written a 3-part analysis of Imam al-Tahawi's Ikhtilaf al-Fuqaha that I mentioned earlier, or Ikhtilaf al-Ulama. In the second part, this has been published in Islamic Studies, volume 8, number 4, December 1969, between page 268 and 269. There's 3 parts in English, this essay, 50 years ago. It's available if you search hard enough online. He's mentioned this point. Imam Tahawi has been rightly considered by some 19th century authorities as the Mujaddid of the 3rd century. So this is another title that we've not mentioned for Tahawi. Some scholars have said that Imam Tahawi was also a Mujaddid of the 3rd century, in conformity with the hadith quoted by Imam Abu Dawud and others, the hadith being, verily Allah sends to the Ummah at the beginning of every century someone who revives for the Ummah their deen anew. Meaning a renew of the faith, a defender of the faith. The learned of the period were full of praise for Abu Ja'far, but some muhaddithun, meaning hadith scholars, criticized some of his views, which only afterwards increased his honor and high estimation with which he was held by the people. In his Ma'rifat al-Sunan, Abu Bakr al-Bayhaqi writes, Bayhaqi died 458 after the Hijrah, and he's like the equivalent of al-Tahawi. He comes after al-Tahawi for the Shafi'i school. So al-Tahawi was said he was an all-round defender of the Hanafi tradition and a proponent of the Hanafi school with evidences we're talking about. Al-Shafi'i came after al-Tahawi and is the equivalent of al-Tahawi in their madhab, in the Shafi'i school, because he was also a faqih and muhaddith and so on. All those grand titles can be applied to al-Bayhaqi as well. So al-Bayhaqi is mentioned in Ma'rifat al-Sunan this point, that when I started writing this book, meaning Ma'rifat al-Sunan, known also as Sunan al-Wusta, a student of mine brought me a book by Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi, in which Abu Ja'far had declared a number of weak hadith to be sahih. So this is a serious allegation that al-Tahawi, he would deliberately take some weak hadith and make them appear to be sahih for his own benefit, meaning for the benefit of the school that he belonged to, meaning the Hanafi school. For the sake of his own opinion, and a number of sahih hadith he declared weak or da'if for the sake of his own opinion. This criticism, as reported by Al-Hafiz Abdul Qadir al-Qurashi in his Al-Jawahir al-Mudiyya, urged the Shaykh of al-Qurashi to write his Al-Jawhar al-Naqi fil Rad al-Sunan al-Bayhaqi. So Imam Abdul Qadir al-Qurashi, I've mentioned him so many times today, in Al-Jawahir al-Mudiyya, he knew what Bayhaqi had said. And Abdul Qadir al-Qurashi's teacher, who was a Hafiz of Hadith, called Ibn al-Turkmani, I've mentioned him previously as well today, died 745 after the Hijrah, he decided to write a critique on al-Bayhaqi as well, to defend al-Tahawi. So this critique on al-Bayhaqi is called Al-Jawhar al-Naqi. And if you get the first printed edition of Sunan al-Kubra, Sunan al-Kubra of Bayhaqi, that was printed in Hyderabad, you find in the margin at the bottom, Ibn al-Turkmani's reply to al-Bayhaqi is available, which has, Al-Masumi says, which has established that the charge against al-Tahawi is not correct. He has further shown in a number of places that al-Bayhaqi mentions a hadith in support of his own madhab, in the Shafi'i madhab, with a sanad consisting of a da'if rawi, meaning a weak narrator, whom he, meaning Bayhaqi, declares reliable. So the same charge can be levelled against Bayhaqi. This is what Abdul Qadir al-Qurashi is saying, or Ibn al-Turkmani, his teacher, is saying, that Bayhaqi made the allegations against Tahawi. We can make the same allegation against al-Bayhaqi as well. And then mentions the hadith supporting the madhab of the Hanafites with the sanad including the same da'if rawi, whom he erstwhile declared reliable and declares him this time da'if. So The second scholar we can mention who critiqued Imam al-Tahawi was the Hanbali scholar Ahmed ibn Taymiyah. I'm sure many people have heard of Ahmed ibn Taymiyah, died 728 after the Hijrah. In his book Minhaj al-Sunnah al-Nabawiyya fi Naqd al-Shia wal-Qadariyya. This is a book to refute a Shia scholar called al-Hilli, as well as the Qadari sect. And Muhammad Saghir Masumi, again in this book, this article, Imam Tahawi's Ikhtilaf al-Fuqaha, he mentions this point. In his Minhaj al-Sunnah, Ibn Taymiyah remarks about al-Tahawi saying, Ibn Taymiyah says, that al-Tahawi apparently, he is not accustomed to examine hadith as a man of the science does, meaning a scholar of hadith does. He has therefore narrated in the Sharh Ma'ani al-Athar various ahadith and preferred out of these only in most cases all those which he found in respect of reasoning a proof, meaning akal or qiyas as an evidence. All those which he found in respect of reasoning a proof, most of the lot being unestablished and wounded in so far as the isnad is concerned. He has thus no knowledge of isnad as possessed by the people of the science, although he possesses great multitude of hadith and was a jurist and learned. So this is a sharp criticism from Ibn Taymiyah. So Asumi says Ibn Taymiyah's harsh judgment is perhaps due to the fact that al-Tahawi has declared the hadith of Rad al-Shams li Ali, the return of the sun for Ali. It's a well-known hadith, as being sahih. Imam Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi declared this hadith to be sahih, but Ibn Taymiyah found it problematic to accept. And by admitting this hadith sahih, he opposes Ibn Taymiyah's aversion of Ali, against whom Ibn Taymiyah, as it appears, expresses his indignation every time he refers to him, meaning Ali ibn Abi Talib. So Imam Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, in Lisan al-Mizan, he actually mentions under the biography of al-Hilli, the Shiite that I've just mentioned, this point against Ibn Taymiyah, that he belittled Ali ibn Abi Talib. When he wrote this book, Minhaj al-Sunnah, he showed animosity to the fourth Khalif, Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu. So, a person who's written a work on Imam Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi in Urdu language is Mufti Saeed Ahmed Palanpuri, who's a senior Mufti in Darul Ulum Deoband and a Shaykh al-Hadith there, who has visited the UK a number of times as well. He's been to a few of the graduations here in the UK. I've seen him myself a couple of times here. So he's written a work called Hayat Imam Tahawi in Urdu. It's been translated by the late Mufti Afzal Hussain Ilyas, who died a few months ago, from South Africa, a very prolific translator. And this work is available in the shops and is available online as well, under the title The Biography of Imam Tahawi. So in this work, in English, you can find on page 12, Mufti Palanpuri says, Ibn Taymiyah wrote such a severe naqad of Tahawi, meaning criticism of Tahawi, solely on account of his classing the hadith of Asma as sahih, in which mention is made of the sun's returning after sunset for Ali, meaning Abi Talib. Although the content of the hadith is not too clear from a totally academic perspective, it cannot be refuted totally. The muhaddithin in every age have discussed the sanad of this hadith, and after gathering its various roots have classed it as acceptable. Abu Abdullah Nishapuri has researched it and found it to be correct. Allama Suyuti has written on this, and Qadi Iyad in Ash-Shifa bi Ta'rif Huquq al-Mustafa has also classified it as sahih. So it's not just Imam al-Tahawi, but later scholars have agreed with al-Tahawi that it's sahih, and you may get others saying it's not sahih, but the point we're concentrating on is the harsh criticism that Ibn Taymiyah levelled unjustly against Imam al-Tahawi. So Mufti Palanpuri continues, he says, coming back to Ibn Taymiyah, because the sihhat, authenticity of this hadith is against his view, meaning Ibn Taymiyah's view, he conveniently nullifies it with his own brand of qiyas reasoning, as is his habit. And he continues to say, as regards to his allegation that Tahawi is not aware of the rijal, meaning the narrators, and their condition, this is a shot in the dark and a feeble attempt to discredit the great Imam. This is one of the great falls of Ibn Taymiyah and his crowd, but this is a subject of its own. In every chapter in his kitab, Tahawi has discussed the isnad and the rijal of his ahadith. All of his kitabs are freely available. Pick up any of them and see for yourself. Tahawi was an acclaimed and accepted Imam in the field of rijal, meaning on the narrators. When Karabisi wrote his book of lies, Kitabul Mudallisin, in which he attempted to discredit great muhaddithin, then none other than Tahawi refuted his book by writing Naqad Kitab al-Mudallisin, which I mentioned today, and it's lost, but some scholars did refer to it. They had access to it. Now, can a person unacquainted with this field ever manage to do this? Mufti Palanpuri is saying this. And he finishes by saying, the fact of the matter is that Ibn Taymiyah has this extremely immature habit of misconstruing and distorting matters due to his own misunderstandings, and he bears little respect for anyone save himself. If he in his limited understanding thinks a person to have erred in any matter, then he draws a complete analogy on this person and passes judgment accordingly. This is exactly what transpired here, because Tahawi classed the hadith as sahih, which he feels to be not. He draws a conclusion regarding Imam Sahib that Tahawi classifies a hadith in the light of qiyas. This method of his is illogical and totally absurd. To extract a qaida kulliya, a complete or blanket rule from a single instance, waqiya juz'iyya, is nothing but stupidity. So Palanpuri Sahib has used some harsh critique against Ibn Taymiyah, and Ibn Taymiyah was not right to critique Imam al-Tahawi with such unkind words as well. That's the end of the quote from here. And recent Arabic language works devoted to Imam al-Tahawi's background have also defended Imam al-Tahawi from the critique leveled by certain people like al-Bayhaqi or Ibn Taymiyah. You can read further in Arabic, like Abdul Baqi in his book Al-Imam Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi wa Atharu fi Naqd al-Hadith. Another work, Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi, Al-Imam wal-Muhaddith al-Faqih by Abdul Majid Mahmud. Imam al-Tahawi Muhaddithan. And we're coming to the end, just to mention some praise. You've heard the people who criticize al-Tahawi, two notable people. Let's mention some praise on al-Tahawi. Shaykh Fadlur Rahman Azmi, that I mentioned earlier, in his Tanwir al-Hawi fi Tadkhir al-Imam Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi, compiled in 1992. Most likely in Urdu, I've not seen it myself. As I've said earlier, I was sent a translation of it, a draft translation by a Mufti from New York by the name of Mujibur Rahman. He contacted me and he sent me the translation without my need to ask him. I didn't know he had translated it. It's still in draft format, so I'm going to be quoting from this. And it's been translated under the title, The Life and Works of Imam Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi. So Shaykh Fadlur Rahman Azmi, he mentions the praises of ulama. I'll just mention a few examples. Ibn Yunus, we mentioned before, the student of al-Tahawi, in the famous historian of Egypt, writes, Tahawi was reliable, authentic, a faqih, and intelligent. He left behind no equal. Now, you'd be hard pressed to find anyone who's equal to Imam al-Tahawi today. An all-rounder. And then he mentions Maslama bin Qasim al-Andalusi writes, Tahawi was reliable and a faqih of the highest caliber. He was knowledgeable about the differences of the scholars. He had deep insight in his work and was an ardent follower of the Hanafi school of thought. Note, we have already come to know that he was not confined to Imam Abu Hanifa's opinions. Therefore, Maslama's statement here is inaccurate. Why? Because sometimes, as I said, he reached a level of ijtihad. Imam al-Tahawi, sometimes he would have his own preferences. He didn't follow everything Imam Abu Hanifa or his students mentioned in their works. So he would do his own ijtihad at times and would disagree with them as well. Why? Because he'd reached that level of ijtihad, and that's his prerogative. Ibn Abdul Barr al-Maliki writes, Tahawi was the most well acquainted about the detailed biographies of the people, meaning the scholars of Kufa, because he followed the school of the people of Kufa. He was also well grounded in the fiqh of the remaining fuqaha. Imam Sam'ani writes, he was reliable, authentic, and a very wise faqih and scholar. He left behind none like him. And Ibn al-Jawzi, and these are not all from the same school as al-Tahawi, by the way. The ones I've just mentioned, for example, Ibn Abdul Barr was Maliki. Sam'ani was Shafi'i. Ibn al-Jawzi was Hanbali. Ibn al-Jawzi said, he was trustworthy, intelligent, and a brilliant jurist. Sibt Ibn al-Jawzi, the grandson of this Ibn al-Jawzi, he was Hanafi. Sibt Ibn al-Jawzi mentions all are unanimous about Imam Tahawi's virtue, integrity, asceticism and piety. Imam al-Dhahabi, a Shafi scholar, mentions he was a faqih, a muhaddith, a hafiz, a scholar of a very high caliber. He was reliable and trustworthy and a very wise faqih. And Imam al-Zahabi also said that al-Imam, Allama, Hafiz, Muhaddith and Faqih of Egypt, whoever sees the works of this Imam realizes his status in knowledge and the vastness of his understanding. In his Tadkhirah he adds, he was an author of many rare works. Ibn Kathir, one of the students of Zahabi, a Shafi scholar, Ibn Kathir was also a student of Ibn Taymiyah. Zahabi and Ibn Kathir were both students of Ibn Taymiyah. Ibn Taymiyah, we heard his critique against al-Tahawi, but look at his students, they're more fair. Ibn Kathir states he was the author of many beneficial works containing rare insight. He was one of the most authentic and reliable huffaz, meaning of hadith. Salah Safadi, another scholar from that time, from Zahabi's time, Ibn Kathir's time, what does he say? He was a reliable, intelligent and capable faqih who did not leave behind anyone like himself. Yafi'i, another Shafi scholar, says he reached perfection in fiqh and hadith and authored beneficial books. Ibn al-Imad al-Hanbali writes something similar. Imam al-Suyuti said something also in praise of Imam Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi. So there are many more quotes that Shaykh Fadlur Rahman Azmi has mentioned. I'm not going to mention them all. Inshallah, we pray that this work comes out soon, the English edition, so you can get far more detail. As for his death, and he died in 321 after the Hijrah in Egypt, well over 80 years of age. Ibn Yunus has mentioned this in his Tarikh, 321 after the Hijrah is the death date. Sam'ani has also mentioned this in Al-Ansab, and he is buried in a mausoleum in the Qurafa cemetery, as mentioned by Ibn Khalikan in his Wafa'atul Ayan, volume 1, page 72, of present-day Cairo. Indeed, Shaykh Muhammad Zahid al-Kawthari provides a description of a direction to al-Tahawi's mausoleum according to modern geography. In his Al-Hawi, fi Sirat al-Imam al-Tahawi, page 43. So I myself have been and visited the grave of Imam Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi. So I've got a picture here. I think I've passed on one to the other side. If anyone wants to see it, and if you ever go to Cairo, it's not too difficult to find, and you can visit the mausoleum and see the grave of Imam Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi. To finish, to conclude, we will conclude with the supplication that Imam Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi made at the end of his famous creed. So what does he say? Imam Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi finishes by saying, this is our religion and it is what we believe in. Meaning all the things that is mentioned in his creed, Al-Aqidah al-Tahawi or Bayan al-Sunnah wal-Jama'ah, he concludes by saying, this is our religion and it is what we believe in, both inwardly and outwardly, and we renounce any connection before Allah with anyone who goes against what we have said and made clear. Because everything in here represents true Sunni doctrine, the true teachings of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. And then Imam al-Tahawi says, we ask Allah to make us firm in our belief and seal our lives with it, to protect us from varying ideas, scattering opinions and evil schools of thought, such as those of the Mushabbiha, the Mu'tazila, the Jahmiyyah, the Jabariyah, the Qadariyah, and others like them who go against the Sunnah and Jama'ah, meaning the prophetic Sunnah, and the Jama'ah, meaning the way of the Sahaba, and those who followed the way of the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba, and have allied themselves with error. We renounce any connection with them, and in our opinion they are in error and on the path of destruction. So why I concluded with this dua from Imam Abu Ja'far al-Tahawi is because today we live in a world of social media, and we find many people trying to spread many erroneous ideas and beliefs and practices through social media, through YouTube, Facebook, through WhatsApp, through Telegram, and on the street level as well, through the masjids and madrasas and so on, through literature. And many people talk about Aqidah, and if you want to safeguard yourself and enter Jannah with ease, inshallah, then first and foremost we need to rectify our belief system and adhere to the scholars who have been acceptable throughout these centuries. So in terms of creed, then we should make an effort to study this text under scholars. If not scholars, then at least a commentary to it. I've mentioned a couple of commentaries to it today that are due to be published in English if you don't know Arabic. And then, when it comes to everyday life, practicing Islam, what's halal, haram, mandub, makruh, mustahab, and so on, then we should align ourselves with those scholars who have a link back to the great scholars of the Salafus Salihin. It's very easy to say, I follow Salafus Salihin, and I follow Kitab and Sunnah, Quran and Sunnah, but how do you know you're actually following it correctly or not? Then we take from those who have a link back to those early authorities through an unbroken tradition called the chain of transmission system, and those who have graduated from established institutes and have got recognition by their teachers and others as well in society. And with that I will conclude. وآخر الدعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.